Okay, good morning and welcome everyone. I'm really excited to have everyone here with us this morning and to introduce to you today our guest presenter. Mary Sauter has been an employee of Greenbox for almost 5 years, and she has a master's in special education from George Mason University. And in addition to work that she's done at Greenbox, she also worked for the Mason Life program at George Mason, which is a program that's devoted to inclusion for college students with special needs. And it was some really super awesome, exciting work that she did there as well. I want to just remind you that I do record these sessions. So if you don't want to appear on your name or your voice to appear on the video, please turn yourself off. And we're going to have some time built into this for question and answers. So if you have questions, you can feel free to hold those until we get to the question period. You can also type into chat because I do check the chat regularly. All right, and so without any further ado, I'm going to turn the control over to Mary, and Mary's going to talk to us about various toileting issues and some tips and solutions and ways to approach those. All right, Mary, go for it.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay. Okay, so today we're going to talk about some troubles with toileting. At the end, after questions, if anyone wants to know about prerequisites for when a child can be potty trained, we'll talk about that as well. Okay, so the issues that we're going to talk about today are withholding, hiding, and stool toileting refusal. So before you come up with any procedure to treat the child, the first step you want to do is have the parent contact their pediatrician before using any alternative methods such as suppositories or laxatives or enemas, because we don't know what the underlying issue is here, and if it is a medical one, that could disrupt what is happening. So first thing we want is to contact the pediatrician. Okay, so withholding. This is a common problem with bowel movements, and this should be taken care of as soon as possible because it can have serious side effects such as rectal impaction or primary encopresis. Rectal impaction is when the child holds their stool for so long that it hardens in the rectum and nothing can get past. This can be hard to identify because there are times where a child will have leakage, and so it'll go around the stool and it'll seem that the child is having accidents and that they're not controlling their accidents because of the leakage. So this one is hard to identify, but this is where talking to the pediatrician will come in handy because they will be able to tell if the child has hardened stool in their rectum. Another side effect of withholding can be primary encopresis, which is when the child will never attain bowel control. And that is something we want to stay away from because that is hard to correct. Okay, the second thing that children have problems with is hiding. And this is when you'll see a child run away, they'll go sit behind a chair, or they'll go hide under a blanket to have a bowel movement. This is fairly common, and we'll talk about how to handle this in a minute. The third thing is stool toileting refusal. And this is when your child, which you have potty trained to the nth degree, just refuses to poop in the toilet. Common side effects of this are hardened and painful stools or constipation. And these can be things that lead to the child not wanting to have a bowel movement in the toilet. So what do we do? So the first thing you want to do is increase praise with every instance of defecation. You want, whether it's in the diaper or in the toilet, you want to increase praise that they're actually having a bowel movement. We want to stay away from negative terms for these, such as calling it stinky or saying, "Ooh, you had a poop in your pants," because that'll make the child less likely to want to go to the bathroom. The third thing we want to do is shape the behavior. And for you parents, this is when we build up and we have approximations of the behavior. So, for instance, you would start with the child playing with toys in the bathroom, not even sitting on the toilet. And then you would move to them sitting on the toilet and playing with their pants on and playing with toys. And then you would move to them sitting on the toilet without their pants on, playing a game like on their iPad or something. And then that would move to them pooping on the potty. So that's shaping. Next, you would want to find a set schedule. So we need to start tracking when the kids are having their bowel movements, and when you find that they're hiding, when you see them with withholding behaviors, and you want to track them so you know when to take them to the bathroom. Finally, you want to use specific reinforcement. You want something that they're not getting outside of using the toilet, such as M&Ms when they poop on the potty, or a specific iPad game, or a special toy that they get. This will help them really connect going to the potty with getting this reinforcement. Questions?
Okay, so I'm sure people have some questions about things, and Mary, I'm actually going to start with a question about withholding in particular, and whether they're like so you talked about shaping
Yes.
for it, and if you well, hiding, I guess, is the question. So if you have a child who, say, for example, hides behind the couch when it's time to poop, how might you go about transitioning that behavior from running behind the couch to poop to going over to the toilet, getting closer and closer to the bathroom, for example? Do you have any suggestions or thoughts about that?
That is a great question.
I didn't mean to throw you on the spot. I just thought since you brought that up.
That is definitely a behavior that you would want to start with shaping. You could, when they start to run, pull out the reinforcement or the toy that they get when they poop on the potty and show them it, take them over to say, "Look, we can go play in the bathroom and you can play with this toy," and show them that they have the ability to gain that reinforcement.
Yeah, the hiding thing is not uncommon, and it's it's particularly hard. You have the kids who will definitely wait until you put on a pull-up, or will go into a private location to do their bowel movements, and it's hard to get that transferred from the that hiding situation to actually going on going on the toilet itself. So if anybody else in the room has experience with that and suggestions, feel free to pop yourself into our this is a Q&A, but this is also kind of just like discussion time. So hop on in, y'all.
Not like hiding when they go, but they'll go and then hide the bowel movement or hide the diaper so that, I guess they don't family doesn't know or whatnot. I've heard, not experienced though. So
Was that so in kids who were already trained, or so like
um,
accident situations, or not
no,
trained yet?
they were trained, and it was just they weren't going, having a bowel movement on the toilet. We had talked about it in one of my classes, and or we talked about like a shaping kind of procedure too, and the not like the negative comments towards it, I think was a big one for the family, the reaction when it was found kind of thing.
Yeah, so that would definitely be an occasion where you would want to praise the child for having a bowel movement and shape the behavior of, okay, next time we're going to go in the potty. This is what we're going to do. We're going to, talk to an adult, or we're going to.
Can I intervene for a second? Sorry, Mary.
Yeah,
But before we talk about shaping, can you explain to the parents what shaping is? I know there's one parent, and that I know of, so she may need to understand what shaping is.
So shaping is when you build up to a response. It's when you work to find, it's called successive approximations. And it's when so like with talking, you might say ba, and then ball, and then ball, where you're building up to the final behavior, and then each one is building on the other.
Perfect. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, and in terms of toileting, it can be not just like lengthening or making a word out of sounds, building it up, but also changing what it looks like some. So
I
you
have a
might,
question.
yeah, go ahead.
So with my son, I tried like a while back to body train him, and I was giving him, reinforcement, and I was like, yeah, you peed in the toilet, yeah, because I have no problem for him going to the bathroom or sit in the toilet. My problem is to just use the toilet. So when he used to use it, I was like, yeah, good, Damien, whatever, and I was like giving him candy that I have special for him in the bathroom. So when he do it, I give it to him. And then it didn't work because he will just scream and have a tantrum that he don't want to use the toilet. But as soon as he get up, he just use the toilet. So I stopped for a while because it was going like he was just getting very agitated. And then I try again with him. Like not too long ago, I try again. So I was like, hey, Damien, when you're done, let me know. And every time I get a success with it, but he's still right now, like, because I think like he didn't want you to see him, and I stopped giving him reinforcement. So because of this, I was getting more success that I was using the reinforcement. Right now, he just don't want to do it because he just don't want to do it. Like he don't want to go to the bathroom or like if he will sit down in the toilet, but as soon as he get up, he will just, pee in the tub when he taking his bath, a shower or something. And I don't know how I fix that.
So that's an interesting situation. And Mary, do you want to go on and talk about potty training, the slides you have on that, and we can circle back to that? And actually then afterwards, like we're not done talking about, in general, we're not going to be done talking about other toileting issues. We can have a return to the discussion after you run through the toilet training thing. But as we lead into that slide, I just want to say, think about really how weird it is that we do this thing of going to the bathroom, eliminating on a toilet, right? I mean, that is just, it's a very strange activity to engage in, right? Why not just go over in the corner and poop? Or why not just, I've already got my clothes off, why not pee in the bathtub, right? It's a very arbitrary sort of way to engage in elimination. Toileting is, or Western toileting is. So it takes some extra work to be able to teach kids to do it that way. So Mary, go ahead and talk about the toilet training slide that you have, and then we'll circle back to the question.
Okay. So when your child is getting ready to be potty trained, these are some things that you want to see if your child can do. So it's important to have at least 4 of these checked off before you start potty training a child. So you want them to be able to stay dry for 2 hours. They want to have regular bowel movements. You want them to be able to follow simple directions. You want them to show discomfort in a soiled or wet diaper. They have to be able to pull up their pants and pull their pants down. And they may start to request to wear underwear or use the toilet. So when you have these prerequisites, and when you have at least some of these, you can start potty training a child. And when you do that, you want to start increasing liquid intake so that they are having regular instances of going to the bathroom. You want to put them on a set schedule too, so that, every 30 minutes we're going to the bathroom, and this is what we're doing right now. Yeah.
Schedules and increased fluid intake are huge pieces of a typical toilet training protocol for all kids, right? Regardless of whether or not they have autism or other special needs. So those are always important suggestions. Does anybody, before we circle back to the question more specifically, anyone else in the room have comments, observations, things to say about the prerequisites and the situations under which toileting is likely to be successful or not successful? Because I know there's a bunch of people in here, some of whom are parents, some of whom are therapists who've helped parents with training, who may have some other comments.
Hi, it's Steph.
Hi, Steph.
I'm curious about when you have a child who's very motivated to just like they can go and they understand the process, but they get very fixated on what they're doing and therefore will wait to the last minute and tend to have more accidents, or will avoid it when you suggest it and need to have that control on their own, but don't necessarily have the self-management skills.
Whole nother problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the waiting, the kid who and we can talk about that in a minute. Yeah, like what happens when you have that kid who is trained or is in the process of training, but just doesn't want to interrupt what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
Or things like that, or just is not attending to. And I think this is one of those key things when we're talking about prerequisites, right? Is really just not attending to the signals from their body that let them know that they need to go to the bathroom, right? We have a bodily sensation that tells us that we need to use the bathroom. And if you are not attending to that bodily sensation, then what's going to happen, right? You may wait too long, you may not you may not take any action at all. So, you just, if you're wearing a diaper or whatever, you just go to the bathroom, right? So that's a key piece, is that attention to the bodily sensation. And Mary, I didn't mean to jump in on this one, but I've had this one. I've had this problem, not personally. I've had kids like this, right? And that's a good time to go back to schedule. Go ahead, Melanie.
And I think too, that first part where you said taking them to like the pediatrician, because there are some, situations medically that could, impact that sensation and attentiveness. So had that
Yeah,
even with
diuretic
adults that I've
hormone
worked with. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that going back to the pediatrician issue, I mean, that's like super huge. What if, you know, there's an infection that is just, you know, causing more frequent urination or something like that too, that is messing up both the signal, but also the timing of things and being more likely to have accidents. And that going back to the seeing a pediatrician to rule out medical problems before you address things behaviorally is huge. So, Mary, tossing back to you. I'm talking too much.
Okay. So let's talk about that question we had. So I would say, you know, a lot of that has to do with pairing the potty with a positive outcome. And we would need to find a way that we make the bathroom reinforcing for them. So it was great that you were using specific reinforcers for that. You could, you know, have times where you just bring his toys into the bathroom and you guys just play in there and play until his scheduled time that, oh, it's time to go to the bathroom. We've hit this minute mark. Yeah.
Mary, you were very right. I think you reflected or you answered it very well. In my experience, typically when a child is engaged in something very motivating, like even though they have been potty trained, but if they are focusing or too involved in attending to something, a very reinforcing activity, they many times they just wait till the very last minute and then they have accidents. So yeah, uh, making sure that that activity, which is probably more reinforcing than uh, your reinforcer that you've chosen. So it's very good that, yeah, you pair that reinforcing activity with toileting and you can say that, okay, you can have more of that time or you can engage more if you do this. Or bring the toilet if we have potty seats and all those things, so that the effort of going from that area to the toilet is minimized. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
When I know too with the issue of like, you know, waiting to the last minute and then having accidents is we built into the schedule that any time we're like close to the potty. So like when he comes in the morning to clinic and he's putting his lunch away, the bathroom's right there. We're like, oh, let's just try to go potty. And then at snack time or lunchtime when we happen to be near it, that way we're already in that area. So we're not taking him, you know, he's not attending to the fun stuff over in the playroom as much at that point. And
Right.
we haven't had any issues with the refusal to go in then, and most often he is going. So
Yeah, and I think that issue about discomfort with having had an accident and things like that also fits in here, right? Because if you don't have discomfort with having had an accident, or worse, if having accidents, if that behavior has been punished, so reporting that you have had an accident becomes something that's really aversive and you know you're going to get in trouble for doing that. Then that compounds the problem, right? So you've waited, you didn't want to go from like the super cool fun thing you were doing to the potty. You've now, you know, had the accident in your pants, or you got to the bathroom but it was too late and you still went in your pants and on the floor or whatever, however that played out, right? And now there's some punishment attached to that, or some negative consequences. You know, there is a place for that on some level, but it also makes it less likely that a child will report that they had an accident because they don't want to get in trouble for having accidents. And that's when, and circling back to another question, right, where you see the kids who will have they will, you know, like have a toileting accident, a bowel accident, and will do the same thing. They'll hide their underwear. They'll change, but they'll hide their underwear, things like that, because there's punishment involved, there's stigma involved with an accident, especially when you're talking about kids as they start to get older, and things like that. Going back one more time to the issue of pediatricians, for kids who are also diagnosed with ADHD, and there is literature, there's research specifically showing that is the accidents are more likely than kids without ADHD for those same kinds of things. They're just not paying attention to the signals. They're not shifting activities. So I know a lot of people think about ADHD as being like you're pinging from thing to thing to thing to thing, right? But it also, the part of ADHD that people don't always recognize is hyperfocus. So if you can become very, very, very focused on an activity. Video games is a huge one for kids with ADHD. Video games tend to be a hyperfocus area. There's a lot going on in video games, so it's constantly changing within the video game, right? So you're kind of sticking with that, and you become so focused on that you don't notice those bodily sensations. So it's also worth looking at, especially when you're talking about some of the older kids. When the parent question that we're kind of addressing is, and we've kind of veered all over from at the moment, is a younger child, but for the older kids, you also want to take into consideration whether there's an ADHD diagnosis and how that is going to change how you address those kinds of accidents as well. Okay, who else has things to say about that question?
I can piggyback another question on that unless someone else has something more related.
Go for it.
All right, so when you have a client who is dealing with maybe a pediatric issue like IBS or constipation pretty regularly on top of an autism diagnosis with or without ADHD, are you aware of any research or guidelines for the sort of emotional support through that? I've had clients who the potty's just aversive because they're having, bad feelings in their body, and it doesn't necessarily mean they don't want to use the potty. It means like they're struggling to go, and then they want their parents with them, and we can have attachment like barriers come up, or literally like they're struggling to go to the bathroom and they want their parents to basically like make it happen, and just some guidance on that for a therapist who might be present during that time, or that kind of supplemental support when there's other people involved like OT and pediatricians.
Or just for parents who are, supporting their child through that. Mary, did that come up in the multitude of articles that you were reading?
So I would take this one and I would go with the shaping for this one. You have the parent with you, start it with the parent with you while you're going to the bathroom. And then maybe they're standing at the door when you're going to the bathroom. And then maybe the door is closed and they're standing outside the door with the bathroom. Constipation is tricky because it adds that level of discomfort. And this is where, talking to the doctor about getting something like a laxative or that would help them soften the stool and make it a more comfortable situation for the child.
It becomes really tricky, right? Because with those really hard impacted stools, when they do come out, that is not a pleasant experience.
No.
Right? Yeah. So then that reframes the whole toileting experience to something that is fairly aversive. So you also, in addition to the shaping, I think you really need to, unfortunately, it's not my favorite thing, right? But that's to use a lot of contrived reinforcement, right? ultimately you want the reinforcer for toileting to be natural, right? That's what's going to maintain it. But sometimes you need to pile on those potty parties in order to get past a certain point and to overcome those kinds of feelings of very, the very discomforting feelings that they might be having, the pain that comes with dealing with those really difficult stools and things like that. So I'm just going to throw in also really upping the reinforcers that you have available for when the stool does, for when a successful potty toileting, for when a successful toileting incident happens. How about that? That's the way I'm going to put that.
Yes, you
And
would
I think-
definitely want to praise that when they actually have the bowel movement. You want to successfully praise that they had it and it was in the potty and reinforce that situation.
And I think too, making the whole bathroom itself, not aversive, so, fun. So is there, like you said, have the certain toys in there and things like that. I think this goes back too to the parent question of, him not liking to sit on the toilet or go on the toilet. So is there, ways to, is it a certain potty seat would make him feel more comfortable? I don't know, like with little boys, they've done stuff with like putting Cheerios in the potty. I think pairing all this, that the potty, going to the bathroom can be fun somehow.
Right? It has to, so that, and I want to tie that back to my statement about how unnatural the whole, I'm going to put my pee or my poop in this white thing that's in front of me, right? What's that about? Like, why do I want to do that? What's my motivation for doing that? Right? And that's it, because it's not a natural thing to wait until you're into this small room with this white bowl in front of you, and that's where you're going to eliminate. And that's just not like a thing that's naturally occurring in our lives. And it's something that has to be very specifically taught. So the ways in which you can initially be providing all kinds of positive connections to that, right? All kinds of different, like, this is where good stuff happens. Now, obviously you can't keep it there forever, right? Your bathroom is not always going to be the most fun place. And at some point that it has to transfer over to those more natural things, maintaining using it, right? The fact that you are not walking around in soiled clothing, things like that. But in, when you're comparing the different things that when you're a child and you're comparing the different things you could be doing, I could be over there playing with my favorite toy, or I could go into that little room with the white thing and sit on that little white bowl for a while. Which one's cooler? And a lot of times it's going to be that toy over there, right? So there you have to really make that be a place that provides all kinds of good, fun stuff. Comments, questions, other things we want to talk about, problems that people want to raise, that other toileting problems. Again, just we have to kind of make that a place that's once we've ruled out medical things, making it a place that's fun is a big piece of it. Any other questions? Mary, do you have any other tips for the training part of it? We talked about the prerequisites a little bit. Do you have any tips for specifically for training that we haven't already talked about?
We covered a lot of them.
I think that schedule one is big, and pushing fluids is huge too.
Right.
Look, there's no reason to not push fluids in a child or any person, right? Our body needs water. Um, it helps with softening the stools, if that's a problem. It helps with the training for urination in the toilet. So there's good reasons to push fluid regardless, and water, FYI, not those like sugary juices and stuff like that.
Right.
If you're
They
pushing
actually,
fluids though, and they haven't gone for like 2 days though, stop pushing fluids. Like call your doctor because you
oh, true,
can,
yes.
yeah, you can definitely
Yeah.
rupture your bladder, and that's a ER slash could be fatal situation. I don't think I've
Oh, yeah,
ever
yeah,
had a
yeah,
kid
yeah,
who
yeah.
has that kind of bladder control, but many adults do. So if it's an older child, um, that could be something.
Oh, yeah. Oh, thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, if you're like, if there's no urination going on, yeah, don't keep pushing. Yeah. But I had a client at one point who had really, really excellent bladder control, and uh, he was 14 and came to school because I was working at a school at the time, and he would come to school in a diaper and would hold his urine for the entire day and not go until he got onto the bus to go home. And we were actively working on that. But once a child has bladder control and um, can hold it and chooses to hold it, that becomes a really, really difficult thing to reverse, right? Um, and in fact, it had, by the time I left it, we still hadn't fixed it. So I don't have the solution to that problem, although I've heard from people who were still there after I left that it did eventually resolve. But yeah, he would wait, he would get on the bus and just, pee out everything that he had held all day long. And usually that would involve also leaking out of his pull-up. So it was a very substantial problem, but we just couldn't seem to get over it. And he would request to use the toilet, but it was never to actually use the toilet. Requests for using the toilet were requests to escape from a particular situation and just go be by himself for a minute. So, we still had to honor the request to go to the toilet because that's one, a dignity thing, and two, we wanted to eventually get to a place where he was once again using the toilet during the day. But it was compounded by the fact that for him, that was not really a request to use the toilet. It was a request to go and be by himself. So I think the solution there, of course, is to train a new response specifically for toilet, and I think that's what they did. But these things can be very, very difficult. Anybody have any experience with like nighttime wetting that they want to talk about, or questions about nighttime wetting? We didn't really address like nighttime sort of accidents. Again, that's one that if you have that problem, you want to have the pediatrician, perhaps a urologist, double check that to make sure that there isn't a physical thing going on. But there are a variety of devices that can be used to signal that an accident is happening at night. So it essentially wakes the child up at the first drops of urine, and then they use the bathroom. And the idea is to hopefully increase attention to your body's attention even while sleeping to the signals that you need to get up and use the bathroom. And if anybody has situations like that, I can get you information about the kinds of devices that are out there. Anything else?
I came in kind of late, sorry, but did
Okay.
you guys cover poop smearing, or the like how you deal with when this is gonna sound kind of opposite of what we were talking about, like when the bathroom's too fun, stemming on flushing or the water, or maybe the reinforcer on the toilet means that now they just want to sit on the toilet all day. on their phone, like I do, right? We have adults who have toilet problems when they're reading the newspaper, You've been in there for an hour, Dad.
Mary, you got anything on that?
I did not come across poop smearing. I would say for the reinforcer, you can make it only available when they eliminate. So they're not just going to sit on the toilet and get the reinforcer. They, in the beginning they will, like, oh yeah, you're sitting on the toilet, you're getting ready to eliminate, good job. Then once they're regularly eliminating, you cut it back to where, okay, you get it when you eliminate, not when you just sit on the toilet, and then slowly fade back to, okay, you get it every so many times you go to the toilet.
I've definitely, I have the smearing and other kind of potty play, we'll call it. I definitely agree with Mary. Like that I could find like little to none kind of research on that. Yeah, that's a fun behavior to deal with.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
My first day on the job ever as an RBT was poop smear day for me. So close to my heart.
Well, fecal digging and then smearing often starts as kind of a stimulatory behavior. But
there
let's
are
face
studies
it.
on it with homeless populations where they find it's a control thing. But I imagine it's much, much different in children. So
Well, let's take a scenario, right? You don't have the taboos, right? You're a child, so you don't have the taboos against touching your poop and things like that we develop as we grow, and you touch it, and this is like, what's this? Interesting, right? And you might start to develop in some sensory sorts of ways, right? So if you're a sensory seeking child, you might be playing with it, touching it, whatever. Okay, but you're going to get some attention for that. And then if you go further and you're smearing it places, people are reacting to that situation. So I think it's one of those things that ends up potentially starting one way and then evolving into having multiple functions and being reinforced in multiple ways. But that's, for something like fecal smearing, that's a thing that you have to, for the behavior analysts in the room, right? That's something that you have to, take a step back and do some evaluation of an assessment of, why is that occurring? Is that because it may still, frankly, be just a sensory thing. If you think about when kids go to OT, they do things like, draw on mirrors with shaving cream, right? There's a sensory piece to that, and they're doing that because the kids like the sensory stuff. So, things like fecal smearing can remain a sensory activity, but chances are it has also developed some sort of attention maintained thing as well, too. So that's a fun one, though, isn't it? Yay, we all love fecal smearing. It's a good time. But there's kids who do, we had a client who would only poop in the bathtub, same kind of thing. It's about like teaching kids to get things into particular places that they belong. Did that answer the question, Stephanie? Did we get it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had a client that had such a substantial smearing problem that the parents kept her in a onesie that she couldn't get her hands into it in order to prevent that.
Yeah. On the case I was on, it was a little bit of an older kid, non-verbal, and it was I think they knew exactly what was going on because they would do it and then they'd smile at you and you'd end up chasing them around the back. Like everything to try to stop it was so reinforcing. And so we tried to do like really intense sensory experiences before potty to like maybe satiate a little bit. But I wasn't on that case very long, so I don't know if it worked. But
Yeah, it's a hard one to say, just ignore it, right? To hope it goes away because it's fainting, because, they're
yeah.
doing it for the attention or whatever. But then you have, smears on things and that's not cool. So anybody else have experience with things like that they want to throw in?
Yeah, I worked with an adult and would do the fecal smear. And again, it was I think the attention and the sensory kind of play part of it. But we did the same thing with like a onesie type. It ended up being like a wrestling onesie, because then it was kind of tight against the skin, and him being an adult, that, was a little bit harder to get into. And just then kind of providing more opportunities for sensory play, and then also, positive reinforcement for times when he didn't play or use the toilet regularly. That was the biggest, I guess, way that we were able to get rid of it. So.
Yeah, doing reinforcement for other things is important, right? Shifting the consequences from smearing to other, or the positive consequences that they're looking for. Yeah. Mary, do you have other things you want to throw in on any of the questions or any other observations you have about things related to toileting? That Mary did a lot of research. She has been looking into this as part of working with a family, and she's kind of become my resident, the person who's looked up everything there, who's read so many things about toileting.
Gotta give us the greatest hits of potty training, Mary.
I read a lot about instances where the pediatrician has to step in, and I think that's a big factor, that sometimes the kid is having the problem and the parent just gets frustrated because they're having these accidents, or they're they think they're doing it on purpose and they really can't control it. And I think that is why it is so important to first go to the pediatrician, because you're going to have that conflict there. And if you recognize that it's an actual problem that the child can't control, the way that they handle it goes about a lot differently.
Yeah, right. I mean, imagine that you're having a problem. And by the way, GI problems are not atypical for our population that we work with. And there are a lot of kids with autism who have a variety of problems with digestion. And that because their body biologically isn't regulating their elimination in the same way, if you then approach the problems in the wrong way, it compounds the problems and reinforces or punishes things that shouldn't be happening, the wrong things. And so I can't support that statement more, Mary, that you like the first thing when there is some sort of, not potty training specifically, although it's good to talk to a pediatrician about whether a child is ready for potty training based on the pediatrician's assessment. But with any kind of toileting difficulties, with withholding stools, with constipation, with wetting accidents and things like that, to really have a very comprehensive examination by a pediatrician or a specialist, a urologist if necessary, for the wetting accidents that might be happening, to make sure that there isn't a biological basis. And then even if there is a biological basis, to be working with that professional who's diagnosed that, to be able to come up with the right way to address it, so that again, you're not compounding that problem. So that's a really super one, and I'm super important one. I'm so glad that you've highlighted it. Anybody got anything else? This has been a fascinating discussion. If not, we'll wrap it up, and now I can get on with your Saturdays. Anybody?
I have one more.
Absolutely.
So when you have a child who is potty trained and then there's regression, what are sort of the first things you might want to look at? That kind of thing, or like when they're doing really well and then suddenly it kind of super hardcore backtracks. I mean, obviously check with the pediatrician, make sure there's not medical, but from a behavior standpoint.
It's a rough one, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, so Mary, I'm just going to pop in real quick, and you can come in with additional things if you think of them. But if the pediatrician and or any other specialist has ruled out any medical problem, then it's time to go back to some assessment and see, what's changed about the situation.
Yeah.
Right. I was about to say the same thing. Like, many times, attention that the parents are giving to the child also interferes. If that's the only way to seek attention, then maybe that's a problem. And I also I sort of stopped paying attention in between, but I have one question. I'm sure I have ADHD too, but there's one question. Mary, and I don't know if it was attended or not, but many times I have a question regarding a reinforcer.
Okay.
So typically, I advise parents not to use any electronics, because sometimes I feel that those electronics are actually working as an escape behavior, where the child is actually just sitting on the toilet to get because you want to increase the habit, or
Right.
going to the toilet, or prolonging the period that they can stay on the toilet. But then many times they just extend that time and they don't go, only because they know that the moment they go, this thing will be taken away, right? How do you shape that? What would be the way to do that? Like, ideally, yes, we want to increase the time, but then you need a superior motivator or reinforcer after they do something. So, and another thing that I also wanted to sort of mention is that many times we've talked about associating toileting to aversive stimuli, or many times I know that parents want to keep the child in the bathroom, just so that they know that it may happen any moment, and they fear that the moment the child walks out, they're going to have an accident. But keeping the child in the bathroom or in that toilet for an unnumbered, uncertain time, duration of time, also pairs it with very aversive stimuli, like child feels trapped, and that can engage in another problem where they will stop going to the bathroom. So how do you attend that? Typically, for peeing, so I usually tell parents to go and make the child sit for peeing at least 2-3 after you have sort of, you know, the cycle, how frequently are you going? So you assess the durations and times, and then you time it accordingly that, okay, child can go every 30 minutes, child can go every 45 minutes, maybe sit there for 2 to 3 minutes. If they're successful, awesome. If they're not, let them go.
Yeah.
But for pooping, I've seen parents making the child sit on the toilet for 15, 20 minutes, or which is still reasonable, but for hours and hours. And I've have experience where child is tantruming, but they're like offering different reinforcers just to keep them there. But it just becomes such a painful ordeal. How do you attend to that? Thank you.
For the reinforcer, I would definitely only give it to them for those. So we're gonna sit on the toilet for 3 minutes and you're gonna go to the bathroom. Here's your reinforcer. I wouldn't leave it as an open-ended, like, here, you can have this reinforcer and sit on the toilet until whenever you're done, you know, like keep it on a schedule for them. And then I think the schedule is the biggest part of it all. You know, if it is longer sometimes for bowel movements. But I
Did you
think,
see anything about like what duration of time to have them sit? I haven't myself seen any kind of recommendations. I don't know.
no, there was never a specific amount of time for them to sit on the toilet. I think consistency is key. You know, we're gonna sit on the toilet for 5 minutes and then we'll try again in this many minutes. But keeping a schedule of figuring out when their bowel movements are and trying to go to the bathroom when those occur is what.
Yeah, or being able to tell, like there's a lot of kids you can tell they start to do like a poop dance
Right.
kind of thing, and being very sensitive to those kinds of cues as well as to the, you know, anything on the schedule, right? So that you're catching those opportunities. But yeah. Yeah,
Right.
imagine with any other behavior that we were trying to teach, if we said, okay, well, you sit here and you watch videos until you're ready to do the behavior.
Right.
I mean, is there anything else as therapists or as parents that we try to teach kids that way? And I would argue, no, that's not, you know, we don't do that with anything else. And it does, right? It just, you know, I'm going to sit here and watch my video. Cool. I'm down with sitting here, but now I've done the thing that you want and now I have to move on from that. That's not cool. I don't like that. Why would I do that? Yeah.
Yeah, and taking away that reinforcer like negatively affects the relationship. Like that you have to give it up. All right, the timer went off. You have to give it back. Now there's another battle where the child has to give up the most reinforcing thing.